privilege to be here with you all. And
would you like to have a pointer and walk and talk?
No, it's
okay. You're okay.
Yeah, thank you. My association with paper sector and IPTA goes a pretty long way. Been involved with the sector for about nearly 20 to 30 years. A very funny incident without being offensive. Mr. Goyal said, I have been with CII for last 20 years. Actually, I complete about 30 years today. So that's the association which we have with IPTA. The biodata which IPTA has is about 10 years old. So it's a very, very long association with the paper sector and you all, with many of you. It has been a privilege, and I always cherish this moment of speaking to you and addressing the important personal leaders from paper sector. Having said that, I thought Mr. Goyal requested me to speak about energy and energy efficiency. I thought I'll take it a little higher and speak about the overall decarbonization of the paper sector, what the world is doing, what other sectors are doing, and how paper sector can also work towards the overall objective of being net zero. Just a quick a brief about what I would like to speak. How much time do I have, sir?
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Oh, okay. It's better to know the time. You know, Abraham Lincoln was asked to address a dinner session, and he said, how long can I speak? They said, you can speak for any amount of time, but after 7 o'clock, we all leave for dinner. I'll quickly run through my speech. So this is the one which gave us the basis. We thought we will work towards 2 degrees centigrade limit during the Paris Agreement, but somewhere we found the way we are going, the way the business is growing, in spite of COVID putting a halt to the overall growth of the world, there is a need to make the whole world net zero by 2050. Otherwise, the climate-related disasters would be very, very severe. The telling example was, I landed at Kolkata at about 2 a.m. in the morning today from Pune, found there was heavy rain and the entire airport was full of water. An unseasonal rain in the month of February and March is unheard of in Kolkata. This is an indication of the impact of climate change nationally and globally. Having said that, we have taken a step of becoming net zero by 2070, and there have been several points towards this overall net zero objective. We said we will save about 1 billion tons of CO2 by 2030. Who will save? The Prime Minister has made a commitment. All of us together have to save, which means the paper sector also has to reduce its overall CO2 by whatever it could be its contribution towards achieving this target of 1 billion tons by 2030. 500 gigawatt of renewable energy. Who would do? All of us together have to do. All of us together have to contribute so that the nation as a whole achieves this objective. Many national and international leaders have taken up net zero targets. Some of you, your leaders, have also taken up steps towards becoming net zero from the paper sector too. These are some of the background information I thought I will present to you. What are the drivers towards net zero? There could be a legislation for net zero in the country. Right now, Prime Minister has made a commitment to become net zero by 2070 with some targets. Those targets will come to us, and there could be a legislation towards net zero towards all industry. Business is being very, very clearly pushed towards net zero, sir. For example, the largest building owner in the country, which is of course a Canadian investor, he says all my buildings have to become green and become net zero in the next 15 to 20 years of time. So there are a lot of pressure coming from your investor community. There have been a lot of efforts from the government too. Luckily, we are all not exporting much to Europe, and paper is not part of the CBAM. There is a carbon border adjustment mechanism. So whosoever has got a CO2 component in terms of steel, cement, auto component, they all have to pay nearly about 100 euro per ton of CO2, which is being generated because of their manufacture. So there are several regulations and drivers. Indian government has converted the Perform, Achieve and Trade program into a carbon trade program. So there is a lot of push towards becoming net zero. How can net zero help businesses? One thing, let's be sure, and many of you are aware definitely of that, is by becoming net zero, by reducing your overall CO2, definitely you will become more and more competitive. It opens up new markets. Last week I was in Pune. There was a company a small toughened glass manufacturing company in Pune. which worked towards reducing their carbon and becoming net zero. They became net zero company in 2017. Company actually had a turnover of about 50 crores. Right now, they have about 250 to 300 crores. There is a 5-fold increase in about 6 years, just because that was the only toughened glass manufacturing company in the country and in the region manufacturing with zero carbon impact. So there are opportunities to be made if you become net zero. It opens up a lot of new markets, make you more acceptable to community, reputation and attracting investments, makes us more secure and resilient. I'll spend a few seconds more on this overall approach. What do we do? Okay, net zero is something which we all have to take as a target. What do we do? First of all, the easiest thing to do is to improve our overall energy efficiency. Second thing is to improve our overall resource efficiency in terms of material. Third, switch towards cleaner fuel. The entire country is agog with using of hydrogen as a fuel. Look at renewable energy on-site and off-site. Last but not the least, looking at transportation as an opportunity. And then, of course, if all things are not possible, finally look at carbon capture so that ultimately we become net zero. The paper sector, we are right. This was done, a report was done about 2 years back by CII. The overall capacity we estimated from nearly about a 3-fold increase in the next 20 years up to 2040. And we found the overall GHG emission, if left unattended, would go from 30 million tons of CO2 to nearly about 60 million tons of CO2 by about 2040. Unless a deep decarbonization, the Prime Minister has committed that we will halve it by 2030. So a deep decarbonization initiative has to be taken up by the paper sector so that we are able to reduce our overall tons of carbon per ton of paper substantially. So, but with a deep decarbonization drive, that 1.58 or 1.6 in 2019 could become 0.6 by 2040. And ultimately, of course, we become 2070 net zero. Maybe we work towards becoming net zero a little earlier. These are all some of the opportunities. I will not spend much time on them. I only would like to talk about what the paper sector should do. One thing I would request all the leaders here, the leaders of the paper sector here, one, take decarbonization and net zero as an important agenda. You have a large conference of IPTA, you have leaders being present here. The sector as a whole should take decarbonization as a major agenda and perhaps look for a net zero target for the entire sector. This will definitely be greatly beneficial to the sector and give much impetus to this net zero agenda. Secondly, all the big companies would definitely have done or have already done their GHG inventorization, carbon inventorization. There is a need for helping the small and medium-sized mills to inventorize what has been their CO2. Help them to reduce the overall GHG then subsequently, and then ultimately have a sectoral goal of 2040 or 2050. My request is, sir, whenever you have a high-level meeting, please consider having a net zero target by maybe about 2040 or 2050 as one of the important agendas. Some of the steps taken by other sectors I would quickly present and request you to consider. One, of course, electrification and captive renewable energy is something which has been taken up by many of the industries. Foundry, for example, converted all their oil-fired furnaces to electric furnaces and then using renewable energy for meeting their renewable energy for their electricity requirement. We have a chairman who is from the cement sector. There are several cement plants who have huge amount of area available, putting up renewable energy captive power plants so that they are able to meet their entire requirement by renewable. There will be, in a year or so, you will have a cement plant who is meeting its entire requirement of electricity from their renewable energy, generation. This is going to become a reality in cement plant. Cement is going very aggressive on renewable energy. My request is to all of you to consider renewable energy as an on-site renewable energy as a major opportunity. Secondly, electric vehicle. Transportation is one major area for CO2 emissions. Many of the other sectors are already looking at converting some of their diesel-fired vehicles to electric vehicles. For example, you might be very, very surprised to know that 50% of the vehicles sold last year, three-wheelers, were all electric vehicles. So there is a great push towards electric vehicles in the country, particularly on three-wheelers and the last-mile connectivity of goods carrying to the end customers. So there is a lot of emphasis on it. So my request is to consider local internal transportation and transportation of both your raw materials as well as finished product to electricity. Thirdly, sir, there is also a need to all of us wear good clothes. Why? We want to demonstrate that we have a good aesthetic taste and we all look handsome or beautiful. So there is also a need to demonstrate that you are working towards net zero. Please consider converting your headquarter buildings to net zero buildings or green buildings. Just to give you an example, the Bombay House of Tatas, it's a 160-year-old heritage building. They converted it into a green building and now working towards a net zero building. The energy consumption came down from 100 to 28. This is a fall in terms of improvement in terms of energy consumption and significant improvement in efficiency. More than that, it demonstrates your company's commitment towards efficiency. Also consider converting some of your colonies into green and net zero colonies. This also communicates what the company is working towards to your customers. Lastly, also focus on your suppliers, transports, and stockists. The last but not the least, this is one thing which is catching up nationally and globally, is in terms of labeling your products as green. There are a lot of efforts in terms of FSC in the paper sector in India. There is a need to look at developing an Indian eco-label for paper products. Some of you are trying to work with the European Union eco-label and Germany eco-label and Nordic Swan eco-label, but they are not very relevant to the Indian conditions. So if you can consider developing an eco-label for India, that would be definitely very useful. So ladies and gentlemen, to sum up, net zero decarbonization is not something which is far off. There is a need for all of us to work towards becoming a net zero sector and net zero individual companies. Whatever support you would require, the sector would require in terms of becoming, reducing their carbon content and becoming net zero, CI will be very glad to support. Lastly, this is the building where I work from. This is a net zero and a green building, one of the greenest buildings in the country and the world. Mr. Godrej, who is our chairman, he always used to say, first you start practicing and demonstrating before you start preaching out to others. This building is a net zero energy building. It's the first building in the country to become a green building, has created a green building movement in the entire country. And you will all be very proud to know that India has got now about 11 billion square feet of green buildings, which makes India the second largest in the world in terms of green building. I would request all of you to consider visiting the building whenever you can, during your visit to Hyderabad. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure once again to be here. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you.